Welcome to the Next Gen Podcast. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Bryson Wright and Alex Winton. They got next, so let's get to the show.
Hello and welcome into the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Media Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Bryson Wright, and I'm joined by my co-host, Alex Winton. And we got to recap this last week of Grizzlies news, as the Grizzlies are now 2-9, some struggles, one bright spot with that win against the Clippers and everything like that. But we really got to start with the beginning or like the last week since we've been on this podcast. And we got to start with that Jazz game, because that Jazz game might have been one of the crazier games that we've had this season. Really, just to get into it, the Grizzlies had some of their same issues in terms of like guarding the three-point line and stuff like that. But that wasn't the main takeaway from that game. The main takeaway was the refs and basically the Taylor Jenkins rant after the game, which I thought was pretty funny. Like, I thought it was funny. I thought it was good. Him like sitting down and being like, go ahead and saddle up or whatever he said to, I think it was like the Michael Cole who was sitting there. It's like, y'all better record this and then call it the officials atrocious. And then talked about Jaren getting ejected, which I didn't agree with the Jaren ejection in that game. It was one of those things where like it felt like the Grizzlies were kind of dead in the water when that happened. Jaren definitely got fouled. He got mad at the ref. I think he probably did deserve a tech. Like, I wouldn't have been mad at him getting a tech, but for him to get ejected, I thought that was a little bit too far. But it did feel like it kind of gave the Grizzlies like a boost. I feel like a lot of times when a player gets ejected, it really wasn't just the team, like the team itself, but the fans really got a boost, because it kind of felt like as much as the Grizzlies hadn't been playing well, it gave the fans somebody to actually get mad at besides the Grizzlies and get mad at the refs. And it felt like it really gave them a lot more energy. And really down the stretch, I don't think they could have had a chance to win that game. But they've kind of had this pattern where they dig themselves into such big holes early, even if it's only like 10, 15 points, when their offense right now, it's not in a good place to be able to overcome that. So in that Jazz game, they went down. I think they went down by over 20, and they came all the way back and even took the lead for a little bit. But it was just so much for them to get back. It's like you just can't go down by 10, 15, 20 and lose quarters by 20 points. And that's been their issue. They'll lose one quarter by like 20 points, and that's essentially decides the game. And I feel like that's kind of how it felt in that Jazz game too. But I like seeing Taylor Jenkins go after the refs a little bit. Honestly, it probably should have happened a little bit earlier. He's only really done that like one other time. So I'm glad to see him like try to stand up for his guys and stuff like that. And I thought that was like the biggest, like the first big takeaway from like this last week. And then we can get into like the Lakers and Clippers games after that too.
Yeah. That was a real eventful game, to say the least, at least from a refereeing standpoint. Because it did feel like just the flow of the game was never there, even though they were down and got back into the game. Like, it felt like the flow was like all over the place, at least for like, 2.5 quarters? I think Jaren got ejected in the third quarter, if I'm not mistaken. And so that game was interesting. They obviously, I think they made a change to the lineup, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the first game Jacob Gilyard started, if I'm not mistaken. They had Gilyard, Smart, Bane, Biyombo, and Jaren out there. And I mean, I think, again, I kind of get why they did that. Because, again, they wanted to take Smart off the ball a little bit and not really even have to make him make as many decisions. But in spite of that, I don't know if it really – I mean, I think it helped them flow a little bit more. But ultimately, it didn't help the main thing, which I think part of the reason why they lost the game was just the shot making. I think the shot making still lacked in that game. I mean, they made 19 threes. But again, as we talked about it the last couple of weeks, this is the timely ones. Because when Jaren got ejected, they got back into that game and they were making timely shots to stay within within like a couple of possessions here or there. But ultimately, they ended up losing because I think Roddy missed like 2 big threes wide open, and then I think Clarkson and I think maybe Lauri Markkanen came down on the other end and hit 2 big ones. And that sometimes it's just how it is. Like it's a mega miss league, and sometimes you'll miss a key and then all wide open shots. And so it was good to see them give themselves the chance to win that game, especially consider how it started. But I will say this about the refs one more time is like, it's a bad thing when Jaren gets ejected. Like Jaren never got ejected, rarely gets a technical foul. Like even Jakes was talking about it in that past press game or post game presser. Like Jaren's one of the most professional players. He doesn't really get mad about a lot. So like for him to get mad about the call, and again, most people saw like when they saw the initial call, they thought that was the only one. If people watched the possession before that, it was like a buildup of things because Jaren got fouled the possession before by Kelly Olynyk and they didn't call nothing. Then they come down on the other end again and he gets a bucket and they don't call nothing. So it was like a pent up type of thing, and that kind of made him go overboard and get out the game. And again, it happens. I'm not really. I personally wasn't mad at it because again, like you said, it should have happened sooner. Whether it's Jenkins getting mad or Jaren getting mad, because I feel like sometimes the refs don't give them the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, especially Jaren. And so I'm not really mad about either of them getting mad. Like you said, I found the Jenkins post game presser hilarious. The saddle up part of the whole thing is the funniest thing, especially after what he said. Because he's just all over the place, man. It was just so funny, man. See, watching that press conference, I just keep thinking about that. Some people even made shirts out of that press conference because of the quote, the effing atrocious quote. That was so funny, very funny. But it was a tough loss. But I mean, just the way how it started, I really can't be mad about the game. Like it was just because they, like you said, they're not in a position to really have, like I said, margin of error is slim. So for them to even come back in that game was impressive. And again, they got to basically be perfect the whole rest of the game, especially with no Jaren, because I think he had like 14 points at the time and it was on good efficiency. So, it was just tough. But I mean, again, it happens. You got to go on to the next. I do hate that we still haven't won at home. That's the last thing I'll say. Hate that we still haven't won at home yet. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the worst thing is that both of their wins have been on the road, and like coming off of last year where they were so awesome at home, had the best home record in the NBA. They got to get one at home at some point. We're going to talk a little bit about what's coming up next too, which they might have a chance to get their first home dub coming up soon, but it's going to be a tough one because I think their next home game is against the Celtics. So like that's a tough one to try to get the first win against. So we'll see if they can actually get that and see like who they actually are going to get that against. But so talking about that game, then the Clippers game, which we're going to get into some stuff about Jaren after this. Obviously, Jaren did not play really well in that Clippers game or that Lakers game, and we were going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the conversations have been surrounding that as like a separate topic. But just to talk about that Clippers game at first, I thought it was really interesting to see like Jacob Gilyard starting in that matchup against James Harden, because you could argue that Jacob Gilyard might have actually outplayed James Harden in that game. If you talk about like an impact standpoint, which is kind of just wild to think about. So shout out to him for that. But I did really enjoy the way that Desmond Bane really played against the Clippers. I think that especially like down the stretch of that game, I thought he was pretty awesome. I feel like he did have not necessarily his best game shooting the ball, but I think he did a good job of like when nobody else was really doing anything on offense, he was like, I'm going to like will this team to this win. And I felt like he did a really good job of that, ended up having 27 points, 6 assists. And I just feel like we're kind of seeing him like come into his own. And I also will say it sucks that Marcus Smart is injured now, and we're going to talk about that too. But in that Clippers game, I felt like it was one of his best games as a Grizzly, not just because of his scoring. Like I think he ended up with 17 points, but that last play that he made where he dove out on the floor and made like the backhanded pass to David Roddy was one of the best plays that I've seen all season from anybody. It was awesome to see that. So he might have made the biggest play of the game by doing that. And I felt like he did a really good job on defense and really being the defender that the Grizzlies have needed in that game as well. But yeah, it was good to see them get another win. Still hoping to see them get one at home at some point. But I think it also says a lot about the Clippers. I don't think the Clippers have won since James Harden got there, so it's looking like that's not going to work out very well for them either. So that's why I was like going into that game, it was kind of like I don't even want to say unstoppable force versus an immovable object because it's kind of like the opposite. But it's like 2-8 versus haven't won with Harden, and it was like something's got to give. Or I guess they were 1-8 at the time, right? It's like something's got to give, and it wasn't the Grizzlies, so the Grizzlies got the win. And I thought it was a good ending to the game. But like we're going to talk about, they definitely needed more out of Jaren in these last two games, and I also think that in that game, I think we're kind of starting to see David Roddy start to come into his own a little bit more. I felt like in that game, he played really well, had a big offensive rebound down the stretch of that game, too, which was another one that might have been the play of the game between him and Marcus Smart. And he's also the one that finished that Marcus Smart assist as well. So I've liked what I've seen from him. So wanted to give him a shout out for that. But yeah, I'll let you talk about that game next, too.
Yeah, disclaimer: I watched. I didn't get to watch the full game in its entirety. I had to watch the highlights and then watch like clips here and there. But I watched majority of it. And from what you said was very accurate for the most part. Another person I want to give a shout out to really was Bismack Biyombo. From what I watched, he was playing like out of his mind. He had a double-double, 13 and 12. But it seemed like he was making every big play, whether that was getting a big rebound or big stop. I was able to really see that he was very impactful. And again, I mean, shout out to him because he's really been good. Like, I mean, he basically had to play 30, 35 minutes most of these games now. And he's came in like straight off of just, working out and didn't have a training camp. So obviously want to give a salute to him. But like to your point about what was going on, the thing about them is they got out to a decent start and kind of held on to the lead for the most part, which is kind of different. For the most part, either they're starting behind 20 or if they keep a lead, it's only for like a minute. But it seems like throughout most of the game, they had the lead. And now, granted, in the fourth, it got in the last like 5, 6, or like 5 to 7 minutes. Clippers took a lead at one point for a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a big game for them. Obviously, like you said, something had to give because obviously Harden and the Clippers, they still haven't won a game with him there. And then on top of that, we were 1-8. And then on top of that, it was an early Sunday game, so I just had a bad feeling about it in that sense, just because it's like, early games like that, like even like afternoon tip off. Basically, for whatever reason with the Grizzlies, I never liked them, just how they feel. I just never liked the feel of them. But they proved me wrong. You know what I mean? They proved my doubts a little bit wrong. But yeah, no, I mean, I think obviously again, Jaren's got to be better in that game. But it seemed like that game was a defensive game anyway, so that bad Jaren game didn't hurt you as much because both teams really couldn't score. I mean, games 105 to 101, like that's like a vintage mid 2000s type of score. You usually see those scores in like the 120s, 130s. But yeah, no, I think Smart had a really good game. Like you said, that play, that assist he had to Roddy at the end was crazy. I saw that all on Twitter. Just how it happened was just it was just a funny play because you're like, oh no, you're like, oh cool, oh wait, no, oh yes, like that's basically how that play was to me when I saw it. But yeah, no, I think it was a good game for them. Obviously, to build some again, like they it seems like they've both of their wins have been on the road, which is pretty good to considering the circumstances last year. I mean, they haven't been a good team in general, but I mean, last year they were like bad on the road, and for me, I don't want to say they've been better. I mean, obviously they've been to this point they've been better on the road this season, but just this season compared to last year's season, it kind of I don't know, I really don't worry about them too much on the road as much as I did last year. I feel like a lot of this has been more so as their struggles is the lack of talent versus the lack of. I mean, obviously there's more problems, but more so it's a lack of talent than I feel like a lack of focus and attention to detail. But I mean, I think they stepped up to the plate that Sunday game, so it was good to have that win. Especially because again, like I said, you got to start stringing games together because you can't keep alternating one. You win one, lose one, win one, lose one. Like you need to try to get you a win streak soon. That way, because again, we're creeping up. I think we got 14 more games for Jaren's back, 14, 15 more games. So you gotta get yourself back into, and now granted, they're only I think 3 half games out the 7th seed basically right now, so it's not all bad. But again, Every game matters in the West. How the West is looking, you could be the second seed to the eighth seed could be separated by 1 or 2 games. So every game matters. So I think they got to start stringing the games together. But you at this point you'll take any win, anything that can build their confidence, you'll take. So I'm glad they were able to win that game and pull it out.
Yeah, no, I like what you said about worrying about them on the road. I think the biggest thing is that you don't worry about them on the road. Like last year, it was like you only worried about road games, but now it's like I have an equal amount of worry about road and home games going into it. So it's like I don't think that them being on the road has been a difference because they've had the same struggles on the road and at home. You know what I mean? So it like hasn't really felt like as big of a difference as last year, where it felt like there were some things that it's like they only show up on the road and then at home they look like one of the best teams in the NBA consistently. So it's just kind of weird to kind of see that change a little bit, and to see them get both of their wins on the road despite all the struggles they've had. Like you would have expected them to pull out one of those games at home more than on the road, but then to kind of get into that Lakers game, it's just so clear the Lakers are just a really bad matchup for the Grizzlies, especially as currently constructed without Ja, because basically the Lakers were just looking at when they're looking at that Grizzlies team, there is nobody that scares them off the dribble the way that John Morant does. So it's kind of like it gives Anthony Davis a chance to kind of just, stay in the paint. He doesn't really have to help out on a lot of people. The Grizzlies haven't put a lot of pressure on the defense. So it just puts everybody at a disadvantage. And the way that they really defended, I felt like they just came out and set the tone physically too. Like really, like from a physicality standpoint, the only players that really matched that physicality was, Marcus Smart in the first 8 minutes of that game. I thought he did a good job being physical and stuff like that on defense. And then he sprains his ankle. Or I know they said they haven't officially said what it is, but it looked like a sprained ankle. He turned his ankle really badly, right? I think Desmond Bane came out and he was ready for the physicality of the game. And I think he was also, like you saw with that whole play with AD and Santi when AD pushed Santi after Santi kind of bumped into him before that. So like they gave him double text, it was whatever. And then Bane kind of goes over to AD and kind of just tell him, like we're not scared of you, or I'm not scared of you. It doesn't matter. And I felt like he brought that energy that the rest of the team needed. And I feel like David Roddy did a good job of doing that too. David Roddy did a good job of being physical, getting to the rim and stuff like that. He did a good job. One time he even attacked AD. I think he got fouled, but it looked like he was trying to dunk on him. You know what I mean? Like he was like he was one of he. I feel like he brought it that night. And then Santi, which he had the points, but the beginning was just not good for him. He kind of picked it up in that third or fourth quarter, but it really felt like they just got down by so much in that first quarter, and it just really felt like they were just clawing their way back, and they never really could. They really just couldn't make. They couldn't make any way. Like they couldn't come back. I really felt like they didn't really cut into the lead. It felt like once the Lakers kind of got that lead, the Grizzlies, even though in some of these games they've made some what some people will call fake comebacks, where they come back and then still lose. They didn't even get one of those in that Lakers game. So yeah, that was like I would say that was probably the toughest game, and I think the reason why it felt even worse is because it kind of felt like it's the same thing that happened at the end of last season in Game 6. It kind of wasn't as bad in this game, but it's like it kind of felt that same way watching the end of that game. So that's why I think the Lakers game was probably the one that was the toughest to watch. But also, it's like when you take everything into context with the injuries, obviously Marcus Smart going out during the game and Luke Kennard not playing in the second half definitely hurt them. But even when those guys were playing, they just didn't bring that physicality. And I feel like the Jaren and AD matchup, I think that's like the worst matchup for Jaren in the NBA. And I don't think it's really even close. Just because we know that Jaren is really good against players that are either bigger than him and too slow to guard him, or players that are smaller than him and where he can really dominate on the interior. And Anthony Davis is neither of those. So like they're going to have to figure out a way to get Jaren going when Anthony Davis is on the floor if they want to beat the Lakers, especially like even when Ja is back, they're going to have to find a way to do that.
Yeah. I think that game was, I mean, again, there was a lot of outrage from that game. And I think a lot of it, I don't want to say it's fake outrage because it's not. I think you should be critical of the team and all this. I think a lot of the outrage was because of how last season ended in LA. And then you have this game. I won't say it had a similar feel to it, but obviously got away from them to a certain extent. Uh, I think that's where a lot of the comments came from. And so, again, I think it's just, I think folks felt like they got embarrassed and they got punked. And to me, I just felt like they didn't have the talent. And like you said, it was really the bad start. Because again, I say it all the time. I'm gonna keep saying it. Margin of error. Grizz have none, so they got to play like they can't afford to have a bad Jaren game. Then on top of that, you have a Smart go out, then Luke go out at the same time, and then one of your bench players is not good. And in terms of Santi wasn't good to start, but he picked up his game. Well, the thing is, his box score was good, but I felt like he had a slow start, especially early on, and then like with them being able to throw two on the ball at Bang, they didn't really, like you said before, they don't really respect anybody else from a perimeter scoring standpoint. So yeah, I just felt like they got behind too early, and then like the come as I like to say, if for all my gamblers in here or that listen to podcasts, I like to say teams like to cover the spread when they come back. Like that's what I mean by that. Like what you mean by fake comebacks, that's what I like to call it. They like to cover the spread in terms of how many points they lose or win by. That's what the Grizzlies kind of did to a certain extent. But I mean, it's kind of it happens. I mean, for me personally, that game was gonna be tough anyway, just because it was they seemed almost struggling in LA, but I feel like last three, because I think last year, and especially last year, they just struggled in LA. The year prior to, they did a decent job, but last year they really struggled to play in LA. So I didn't really expect them to win that game anyway. But obviously, I felt like guys could have played better. But I'm not really losing sleep or anything or tripping over that loss. I just feel like the talent. Again, I keep saying they don't have enough. Their talent on the team is not enough. So they don't have no margin for error for whatever you want to call it, coaching mistakes or guys playing under the level. Like they don't have that type of error, and that's what happened. They just got behind too early, and they can never really get back into it. Because I think their best quarter was the third quarter, but by that time they're already down by like 20 points at that time. So it's just tough, especially again for Jaren with the matchup. To talk about Jaren is just, again, well, I guess we'll talk about it. The whole Twitter stuff they were talking about. I personally get if some player, plays bad and he's the only reason they lost. But the whole team didn't really play that well. When I look at the box score, I mean, your bench played well. Like Aldama had 24, Roddy had 17, and Tillman had 15. But a lot of that was in like garbage time. You know what I mean? So, or by the time the game was already over. So,
yeah, for sure.
But with Jaren, I think just like the AD matchup is tough. Like just from and it's gonna be tough for them anyway from the simple standpoint of what I've been saying. They don't have a lot of shooting, so the way they said that some of their lineups are set up, and it was like that in the playoffs. It was easier to guard Jaren and Ja, who like to not to say they can't shoot, because especially Jaren, but they like to get a lot of their points in the paint. And so when you can help off of people that are non-shooters, especially then on top of that, having a guy like AD who obviously hasn't won a defensive player of the year, but he's been an all defensive guy first team and been one of the best defenders in the league when he's healthy, it makes his job a lot easier to have to just guard Jaren and then not have to worry about anybody else. Not only that, you can bring another help defender over there. And that's kind of what they were doing. Because they were doing that and also forcing him to be uncomfortable. And so, and then some of it was on Jaren. I felt some some of the moves were kind of funky. Like he was just not looking to really score. Like he's trying to look for more contact than to score. Like trying to get a foul versus trying to just score through the contact. So it was a little bit of both. But I mean, yeah, the matchups have been tough. But I mean, again, it's not like like for me, it's not like Jaren has played bad against for me, it's not like Jaren's playing bad against like a scrub. Like we're talking about Anthony Davis here. Like, and I know people try to say he hadn't played good against Anthony Davis. Please, y'all not. We're not being serious. If y'all saying that, go look at the playoffs. Play very, very well in game 2. Played very well in game 5 against Anthony Davis. And then in the regular season, had that dunk on him. I think it was that game in Memphis. And I can't remember the other game. I think he had like 25. I think it's in LA. Played pretty well against him too. So it's not like he has. It's just the last 5, if you count playoffs, has been pretty rough. But again, it's going to happen. Like, shout out to Sane because he was bringing it up on Twitter. like there's matchups where Bane and Ja struggle the same way, and it just happens. Like whatever it could be the team, it could be a player. Like we saw it with Bane against the Heat. He said, like he even said, I remember when they played the Heat and he got locked up. And I don't want to say locked up, but Jimmy Butler did a good job on him, right? And Jaren had a good game that game. But yet we don't get the same outrage or anything in criticism in the game when it's somebody else. So I just feel like, again, like saying that you got to keep the same energy. But even then, it's not really a bad thing. Like it's just sometimes you just have bad matchups. Like not every player is good against all 30 teams. And if they are, that means they probably like Jokic or like LeBron. Like you that means you like all-time great type of thing. But usually there's always going to be a player, or there's going to be a time where a player struggles against a team for a long stretch, whatever it may be, whatever the context is. And that's just what's happening with Jaren right now. And I think he'll turn around. I think obviously getting Ja back in that matchup helps him. Just so because you don't have to depend on him to score as much. And then on top of that, that brings more attention to Ja Morant when he's in the game. So, and then if, they make some trades here and there, which improves their floor spacing, get some more shooting or some more league average shooting, that might help Jaren to attack the mismatches. Because like you said about with the like, it's just a tough matchup. AD is like, he can do a lot. So, I think it's just, it's going to happen. So I'm not really worried about it, especially in that game. Because I feel like everybody didn't play up to the standard. Jaren could have been better, but yeah, I mean, the whole team could have been better. Like, so it's one of those games you kind of got to just look at the film and take it for what it is and move on. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can't really dwell on it too much.
Yeah, and I think in that Lakers game, it did kind of show that I think the Lakers and Anthony Davis himself not that they have figured Jaren out, like they figured out all the stuff he likes to do, and Anthony Davis is really good at taking all of that away. But it's also on Jaren to understand that like some of the stuff that works on other players is not going to work when you're playing somebody like Anthony Davis. Like I always talk about Jaren, and Jaren talks about it too. He loves to do the big guard stuff, get the ball at the wing, and drive to the basket, do a Euro step, do all that kind of stuff. Right. But that kind of stuff is not going to work as well when you're playing somebody like Anthony Davis. It's just that simple because of the level of defender he is. If you're finishing while you're still going away from the basket, that's going to be a block every time. You got to put your shoulder into him and try to finish through contact. Like that's the only way you're going to score on Anthony Davis. And in the games where he has done that, that's what he's done. He's gotten his shoulder into him and done some hook shots and then stuff like that. But the times when he hasn't played well, like you said, in these last 5 games, he's been trying to do a lot of that, trying to go around Anthony Davis. And because Anthony Davis he's a little bit bigger than him, and I'd say he's probably a little bit slower than Jaren. But the thing is, he has that recovery speed. He has super long arms and everything like that, to where even if you think you've gotten past him, he can just recover super fast. And I think that's kind of what you saw in that game. And yeah, just Jaren, as he is right now, like he's not ready for the physicality of that matchup that like the way that Anthony Davis was. And then it's the same way. And like you said, every player has issues like that because you talk about Jaren with Anthony Davis. Yes, that's a bad matchup for him. But then the very next night, you watch Anthony Davis and he's now 0-8 versus Sabonis. You know what I mean? So it's like everybody has those matchups that just aren't good for them. And I feel like that was the thing for Jaren against the Lakers. It's just AD is just a horrible matchup for him, right? Now, I will say the Clippers game is the one that was like that one concerned me a little bit more just because he was going against Zubac. And I feel like that's the kind of player that he should be able to play against. And the Clippers don't really have a lot of rim protection or anything like that. And it just really felt like he got some good looks. He was just missing a bunch of shots. And, I like some of the looks he got, but then it kind of felt like once he missed a couple shots, he started going away from it. Like he starts going away from the things that he does when he's dominant in these games. So he might come out and he'll miss a couple hook shots and okay, now he thinks I have to go and I have to do a Euro step and I'm off balance and I'm finishing going away from the basket instead of finishing through contact. And I feel like he falls back on that when he starts games and he isn't having a good game. He starts to try to fall back on that when he really should in those games. If he's not playing well, that's when you should look to get him the ball more inside and get him some easy looks and stuff like that. Whereas now I feel like whenever stuff isn't working, okay, so instead of that, I'm going to try to do some drives or I'm going to stay out around the perimeter and shoot threes and stuff like that. which is stuff that he can do. And I think that on the season, he has been a little bit better from three besides these last 2 games. I think these last 2 games brought his percentages down a little bit, but he had been shooting pretty well from three so far this year. But that's still not what you want him to be focused on. Like that shouldn't be his main focus. And I do, like I said, I think it's partly on the coaching staff to find better ways to get him the ball, and also the guards to find him when he's open. Because I mean, we've seen it in the last couple years where there have been times where he's sealed off his defender or where he's open in the paint and guys haven't given him the ball. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for why some of these struggles happened. I think that he's gonna have to be better though. Like that's the end of the story. Like he's gonna have to be better than he was in these last 2 games. Your bad game cannot be 3 for 15 or 3 for 16 when the team is already down so many players, when Ja Morant is suspended and stuff like that. Like if Jaren Jackson Jr. goes 3 for 15, the Grizzlies are not going to win. Like it's just that simple, right? Most times, right? I know in that Clippers game, it was an outlier, but I mean, the Clippers with Harden have just been horrible. You know what I mean? So like, I think they did end up winning that game, but they almost lost that game when they had full control over that. And it's like, if you just have a medium level game from Jaren, it's not close at the end of the game. You know what I mean? So they're not going to win many games when Jaren is shooting the way he has the last 2 games. I know they did end up winning that Clippers game, but it's not sustainable. So he's going to have to be better if the Grizzlies want to string some wins together here and try to make it at least a salvageable season when Ja comes back. Like he's going to have to be better than he was these last 2 games. We're going to have to see more of what we saw like the previous 5 games before that, where he was averaging like, and that's the thing why, and I think that's the reason why sometimes I do get angry at some of the narratives around Jaren, because when he has the good games, people are just like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then he has 2 bad games and all of a sudden everybody's jumping back on this Jaren's got to do this and Jaren's got to do that. Like, whereas somebody like I look at this stuff and I'm like, there are things I want Jaren to get better, even when he has these 30-point games. Like, a bad night is not going to change what I think about Jaren completely, the way that I feel like it does for a lot of people. So yeah, but I feel like he's definitely like I said, he's got to be better than he has been the last 2 games, but it's not like he's never been better than he was the last 2 games. Like these 2 games are the outlier, not the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about Jaren. I mean, if you think, I'm pretty sure I got the numbers up in front of me. If you think Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to be 30% from the field, 18% from the 3 over a course of an 82-game series or season, like, come on. Like, based on law averages, he's going to be better. Like, bad stretches happen. Like, we're going to have a bad stretch with Bane. Bane has had a couple bad games before, like even during the season. Like, it's happened in the small sample size. Like, it happens. But again, I think Jaren, I guess Jaren triggers a lot more people. I don't know, I guess. I think a lot of the talk was just some of it was valid in terms of what was said, at least on Twitter, but some of it to me is just goofy, respectfully, just to be honest. Like, a lot of it is. Just because, like you said, it's like you're very quiet when you talk about him, or like when he has a good game, or like I said, like the Miami game where he was going right at Bam, and it's crickets. But then as soon as he has a bad game, it's like, okay, all we're hearing is this and this and that. Like, again, it's about just keeping the same energy. If you're good, like, I'm here for the criticism, but like keep that criticism for everybody, not just one person in particular. Especially, it'd be different, like I said earlier, if it was like he was the main reason we lost that game. Like, if everybody else played well and he lost the game, or he was bad, like, oh yeah, he's got to be better. Like that Clippers game, for the most part, if they would have lost that game, that probably most of the blame would have been on him because he needs to be better. But like the Lakers game, like I hate to be this way, but like watch the game and look at the box score. Like, I don't think he could have been better, trust, but like the whole team could have been better. Like, it wasn't like just Jaren was the only reason we lost. Like, Bane was Bane was efficient, but he only had 15 points. I mean, Smart got hurt. That can't be helped. You know what I mean? Like, that happens. Like, injuries happen. Luke got hurt. But Biombo could have been better a little bit. Gilliard gave you 9 points. Like, I mean, the bench gave you some points, but again, that was like garbage time. Like, early in the game, they couldn't hit shots if they save the lives, like Roddy shot 25% from three, Zaire shot 29% from three. You know, like people, they got to be better. Everybody got to be better. You know, Bane can only get 15 points in a game. Like Bane's got to at least get 20. Especially because as God being the main guy, go-to guy. So, you know, I just think some of it's just, you know, I always say it. In this, when you're losing, people got to find somebody to be a scapegoat, whether it's the coaching staff, whether it's the players. Now, again, I've been said this. I think a lot of people are scapegoating the wrong people. We need to be mad at the people that are not having the jerseys on right now instead of the people that are. Not to say that the people that are playing and coaching are not at blame. They got blame in this. Trust. Could Jenkins be better in terms of then getting him to guard the three? Absolutely. Can he not have some questionable rotations? Yes. Can Jaren be better and not be more offensively consistent? Yes. But a lot of this comes to what I keep saying. The talent on this roster outside of your best players. They just don't have the talent for the margin of error. Like, they just have the talent, and their margin of error is slim because of that. And so they got to basically play perfect in a lot of these games just to have a chance to win these games. And then if anything goes outside of that, where like the outlier, whether it's the bad Jaren game or somebody gets hurt like they did in this game, 2 people, then it's hard to overcome that. So I think a lot of criticism should go that way. Not to say they're, you know, again, the players shouldn't get any criticism, but I think, again, they're not the main issue. So, you know, they're doing what they can. Again, I'm not trying to give them no, you know, excuse, you know, trying to make too many excuses for him. Like, Jaren's an all-star. Like, he needs to be better. But just think about it. Like I just said with the numbers. Like, do you think Jaren, if you really think Jaren's going to be 30% from the field and 18% from three over an 82-game season, with really 70 now, with I think he's played 11 games. So it's like 70-something games left. If you really think he's going to be that bad, only averaging 11 points too, then more power to you. Then I'm just not going to talk to you. But I don't think that's the case. Like, this is the season. It's up and down. It's a long season for a reason. It's an 82-game season for a reason. You got a lot of highs, you got a lot of lows, whether that's as a team or as a player. Part of it. It's part of the journey. That's why it's called the 82 games. That's why they have these seasons. It's all ups and downs. So he'll be fine. Trust. I don't know. We've seen this before. We've seen this before with all our players. That our best players, at least. Jaren and Bane. They've had bad stretches. Okay, it happens. Move on. You know what I mean? Like, he's not gonna be this bad. Like, I promise you he won't. I can almost guarantee it. If you think he's gonna be this bad, okay, I'm just not even gonna talk to you. But I mean, I know you don't, Bryson, but I'm talking about just in general. But yeah. So
yeah, for sure. No, I got you. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And it's going to be interesting because this next matchup that he has is one I've been looking forward to for a minute, because we're going to get the Jaren versus Wembanyama matchup. And it's going to be really interesting to see how it goes. Obviously, we don't talk about it much on this because this is a Grizzlies focused podcast, but I got to watch Wembanyama in person at Summer League and everything, got to see both of his games. And I think it's going to be an interesting kind of challenge for Jaren, because so much of the times, if he's guarding another 4, you know, he's kind of more roaming off of them and stuff like that. So I'll actually see if they'll change it up and see if he'll actually get that one-on-one matchup, or if they're going to change it a little bit. But I think it's one of the matchups where, since Wemby is also playing the 4, it almost makes you have to do that, unless you want to put Biyombo on Wemby and then put Jaren on. I think they have Zach Collins playing the 5 and stuff like that the last time I checked. So, and then have him maybe roam off of him and see what happens. But the basketball fan in me just really wants to see this Jaren Jackson Jr. versus Victor Wembanyama matchup. Just because of, obviously, as good of a player as Wembanyama is and stuff like that, basically being like something we've never seen before. Getting a chance to see that versus Jaren just winning Defensive Player of the Year, coming off of this tough stretch, to see if he can try to bounce back against another player who is also a really good defender as well, and is going to give you maybe not the same issues as AD because he's not as physical, but from like a length and athleticism standpoint, he gives you some of those same issues. So see how Jaren can actually try to bounce back against a player like that. But I'm really excited to see this matchup after seeing him in Summer League, like seeing Victor Wembanyama in Summer League. This is something I've been thinking about since then. It's like, dude, when we finally get that first Wemby versus Jaren matchup, it's going to be awesome. So I'm really excited for that coming up this Saturday. Yeah, Saturday.
Yeah. They got I think if I'm not mistaken, it's a back-to-back. So but they've had what, like 3 or 4 days off. So yeah, no, it'd be fun. Obviously, like you said, this is a Grizzly focused podcast, but like I mean, I watch the NBA. Obviously, I'm a basketball fan as well. Like that's what I started at. So like I'm always gonna love the game. So I'm watching every other team. So yeah, I've watched a lot of Spurs games off the simple fact of Victor Wembanyama's playing. And again, he does a lot of stuff that's just funny. You just gotta laugh at. Like he's not really a real person to me. Like I keep saying that. I know obviously technically he is a real person.
If I hadn't seen him in person, I wouldn't think he was real either. Like honestly,
Yeah,
like if I
yeah,
hadn't
like
been like a few feet away from him, I would have been like, nah, this is just a YouTube. This somebody made this up. This is CGI. Like it
that's
has
what
to
I'm
be.
saying. Exactly. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like he's not a real dude to me. But yeah, no, he does a lot of stuff that you're like, okay, what like what the heck? Like that doesn't make sense. Um, and so I don't know what to expect. I mean, I know he'll have like probably a couple plays like that where he'll make Jaren or somebody look kind of crazy, and that happened to hit like. I'm pretty sure. I think he played against Bam, and even though Bam had a good game, there were a couple plays where he made Bam look like very small. Like it's just very funny. I think he blocked Jimmy one time and then got it, and I think he got blocked it, gave it to somebody else, then ran down the court, got like a dunk. It was something crazy, bro. Like it's ridiculous, bro. The stuff he does. So it'll be an interesting matchup, like you said. They play him at the 4 or the 5, like him and Zach Collins. I think are just interchangeable. So I mean, I don't know if Jaren will guard him. I think he probably will. I wouldn't be surprised if they put Bismack on him just so Jaren doesn't get the foul trouble. Because again, I do think Wemby could, I won't say put him in foul trouble, but there's a chance, especially as they might use Wemby as a lob threat. But also, it could be hit or miss because the Spurs are a rebuilding team. So there are times where Wemby will look like 20-10. Because again, even to your point about Jaren earlier about getting the ball, this is the case for any bigs. If you're not really Jokic or like maybe Embiid, history showing your bigs are at the mercy of the guards. Like your guards or your wing players can't throw entry passes or get them the ball. Offensively, they're just not going to be as effective. Like that's just the name of the game. Like you got to get them the ball. And so entry passing has been a lost art in today's game. So that's why people watch the games and be like, why this player or this big man didn't have as many points? Well, did you watch the game? They're probably not getting him the ball. They're not throwing him in. He's sealing off, and teams can't get them, or their teammates can't get him the ball, whether that's from the wing or from the top of the key. Like it doesn't matter. Or they're not trying to find, making an effort for them to be found, especially in today's game where it's a perimeter game. And a lot of these guys, some of these guys need to get post touches because they're not as perimeter oriented. So, and that's what happens with Wemby. Like sometimes they'll miss him and they'll not find him. So, we could use that to our advantage, depending on who they play. I mean, they'll have Sohan out there, obviously, as the point guard. So, they could try to speed him up a little bit more or, something along those lines. But, it'd be an interesting matchup. I mean, again, I like to see Jaren against these type of bigs. I'm ready to see him against Wemby. I'm ready to see him against Chet, like those type of bigs. Because these guys are the future. Like these guys are all like, well, Jaren's obviously older. He's 24, but like a lot of these guys are going to be playing against each other for the next like 5 to 8 years. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to say they're all unicorn. They're all unique in their own skill set, but they're all versatile. So, I think that's going to really show in these matchups. So, yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I hope they play. I hope they have a good, I hope Jaren plays well, but I hope we just win. That's what I hope for. Can we just win again? Can we start a win streak? Like I said, I'm tired of these alternating games. Can we get a win? If we can get a good win streak going, I'll be happy. That's really what I care about. Can we string some games together? If we can do that, then I'm like, okay. So hopefully, regardless of the outcome of that matchup, I hope we win. So yeah, but I am excited to see it though.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and obviously I feel the same way. But I did want to get to one last topic before we do close, and that is going to be kind of the roster crunch that we have for the Grizzlies. So if you didn't hear today, the Grizzlies now also have a disabled player exception since Steven Adams is not coming back this season, worth about $6.3 million. If you don't know what that means, it doesn't grant them an extra roster spot, but it does give them a little bit more cap help for if they did need to sign somebody else to the roster, they would have an extra $6 million, basically extra $6 million. The only issue for the Grizzlies right now is not only do they not have an open roster spot, they're actually one over the limit because they signed Bismack Biyombo using the exception that they got from the Ja Morant suspension and the suspended players exception. So that means that when Ja Morant comes back, they're going to have too many people on the roster. So that means either somebody has to get waived or somebody has to be in a consolidation trade when Ja comes back. Now, the reason why I mentioned that disabled player exception is because if they do a consolidation trade, which maybe includes 2 or 3 players to get back one player, they could then sign another player using that disabled player exception. Either somebody, if they want to sign somebody that's just a free agent right now, or if they want to find somebody that's on the buyout market or something like that later in the season, if they have that open roster spot or like closer to the trade deadline and stuff like that, maybe somebody gets traded, they get bought out, you can sign somebody, and that can actually give them an advantage over teams that maybe would only be able to offer the vet minimum to somebody like that, where you have $6 million, where you would be able to offer them that, which is obviously more than the vet minimum. So I think it's something that could be interesting. It's not something I'm expecting the Grizzlies to use right now in terms of that disabled player exception. But the biggest thing that for me is that I doubt that they're going to waive anybody. I feel like if they're going to open up this roster spot, it's probably going to be in a trade. And if it was for me, it would be to see if you can get a trade for a veteran wing guy that can either come off the bench for, like, we're not really sure exactly what's going on with Marcus Smart, but regardless of if Marcus Smart is going to be in that starting lineup, I think you still need another veteran wing guy, just because none of the young wings have really seemed like they've taken that next step. Whereas Roddy, I think Roddy's been the best out of all of them compared to Zaire and Laravia. I think Roddy has been the best so far this season, but he's still a little bit undersized. So if there's a way that you can get like a veteran wing guy, like it's probably gonna be tough, but a guy like a Dorian Finney-Smith, somebody like that, you know what I mean? Just somebody of that level, I could see them do that, and maybe you end up using that player, that disabled player exception. You also have a trade exception from the Dylan Brooks deal that you can use. So it's just like there's a lot of little like nuancy things they could do to try to improve this roster, if not at the trade deadline, like heading into like the second half of the season. So it's just something that I'd keep a watch on to see exactly how they're going to navigate this.
First off, I want to start by saying this. Shout out to Bryson for saying Dorian Finney-Smith. Listen, listen, this is why we on this is why we here. We on the same wavelength. I've been said Dorian, I don't know if y'all listen to the pod during the summer. I've been said to get Dorian Finney-Smith. I'm gonna keep saying it. Get Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't know how. Do it. I don't care. I'm not gonna say don't care how. I want to go the whole house for him, but get him. I've been said it. Dorian, I would love to get Dorian Finney-Smith, but in all seriousness, I think with the whole exception thing, I don't know if they're gonna use it. I doubt they use it. I personally think I know you said they might not waive nobody. I personally don't waive somebody. I think if they're going to waive somebody, it probably would be Lofton, just off of the simple fact of his second year on his contract is not guaranteed, if I'm not mistaken. And then everybody else was either on like a rookie contract or like a deal that's longer than 1 year. Maybe, or either the 1 year is like expiring, like big salary, or they're on a extended deal. Like, because I can go down and listen line, like Lucas got a player, he's got a team option on his deal. Smart's under the contract for like 2 more years. Clark's under contract for years. We just signed Bismack Biyombo, so I think he's played well enough to stay. Jake, Roddy, Zaire still on rookie deals. Santi's on a rookie deal. So like, just you just got to do the numbers, and when you look at it, it's like the odd man out type of thing. Not getting a lot of rotation minutes. He wasn't getting a lot of rotation minutes before Biyombo got here. Now Biyombo's here and he's not getting any. Then X came back into the picture and he was starting. So you get what I'm saying? Like, odd man out. If they got to do that, that's what I see personally. It's just, that's just how the business works sometimes. Then with the numbers and stuff like that, that's just how it goes. But if they want to use it for like what you said, to get a wing, they could do that. Like, they could do a 2-for-1. Or they could do another deal where it's like, they're part of a third team. Like, there are 2 other teams and they're like third team. Like, they could do something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think even if they did anything, I don't think any of that happens till like January or anything. Because, you don't want to make trades too early. Like there's certain,
Yeah,
because
I
again,
agree with that.
yeah, because teams, teams. Shout out to my boy Parker. I don't know if he said. I shout out my boy Parker Fleming. I think he said this earlier, but like, it's just something about like team. You don't want to give teams like, or you don't want to make a trade too early in the season because teams can sense like desperation, especially for a team that's 2-9. You don't want to like teams are knowing you're trying to make deals because your team is in a bad spot. Whereas at the deadline, everybody's trying to make trades. So the deal might be totally different in a month versus what you could get right now. And I know people are like, you need to make a deal move now. And I mean, yeah, you can. But I think also their thinking is to a certain extent, like they probably want to get Job back and see how he fits into the fold. You know what I mean? Regardless of what the record is. It's like get Job back and see how he fits with the group to see what moves need to be kind of made. And again, you're not always going to be whole. Like, I don't expect that. Like, I think that's everybody's like, oh, you wait till they get healthy. You're never fully healthy. But if you can get your best 3 players healthy at the same time on the floor, that's what I would like to see. And then you probably make moves from there. But if I had to say the most immediate move is probably just cutting Lofton, just how the numbers are. But I could see them make a trade, but I don't know what that trade would be. Because again, I know some people are talking about Jacob Gilliard trying to get a spot if he continues to play well. Like, people talk about the D Rose conversation. Would they trade him? Would they cut him? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, who knows with that? Because two ways only get a certain amount of games and days with the main roster. So, so that would be interesting to see, especially if the guys don't come back soon, especially with the Smart out now. D Rose is still out. I don't know how many days of games he can play, but like, it's not 82. So, you got to figure out something sooner than later. But yeah, I think they're working, but I think they're just being patient. Again, they're in a they're in a not the most ideal spot from a roster construction standpoint, but it's not all is lost because again, I keep saying their best players are 25, the other 2 are 24. Like, all can be fixed within the offseason. It's not like their whole roster is bad, but majority, it does need some retool and reconstruction. So I think they'll get to it. I think they realize that I don't think they're just sitting here seeing that they're 2-9 and saying, oh, they don't need to make any moves. Like, you're 2-9 for a reason. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, Zach will get it together. Hopefully, listen, if not, I'm going to continue to keep talking about him on Twitter, and on here. I will continue to keep the energy up. Because again, and also but I mean, he'll be back in 14 games, but we won't see Zach come and put a jersey on. He's not a basketball player. He's a GM. So I'm going to continue to keep calling Zach out. If he hears this, please do your job. That's all I care about. So, yeah, they'll get it figured out.
Do your job. No, that's real. That's real. That's real right there. But I will say I agree with what you said about them probably not making a deal yet. The only thing that I could see is if the Chicago Bulls have a fire sale and they just are like, we're clearing house next week. Because it seems like all the rumors and stuff that I'm hearing, listen, if you can get an Alex Caruso, hey, I'm there. Like, that's where I'm at. You can get an Alex Caruso. Shoot, I'd even look at Patrick Williams. He's not having a good season, but dang, he's 6'8". You know what I mean? Like, you can throw him out there and see. Like, this is, look, trade. He's at the lowest he's going to be. So it's like, if there's a fire sale or something like that and there's a deal that comes up, hey, look, I'm with it. I know it's early, but I would not be opposed to it if it gets you a guy like Alex Caruso. Like, I'd be fine with that. So, yeah, like there's a couple situations where I could see them maybe making a move, maybe getting into like a third team on one of these deals if something like that happens. And it might even just be to pick up, a pick or something like that. You never know. But I feel like whenever these last couple of years, whenever there have been these trades where it might be, 2 or like a 3 or 4 team trades, you might see, oh, the Grizzlies are going to take on this guy and they're going to get a pick. Like, you go back to the Andre Iguodala thing. They got a pick to bring him in and stuff like that. And maybe they do something like that for this as well. So not 100% sure what they're going to do, but I do think that if something does happen and the Bulls just completely blow it up, I could see them going after a guy like that. Obviously, you would also say, what if they look at like DeMar DeRozan? I feel like that's probably out of the question. I don't think that a guy like that is the level of player they're going to be able to get on when it comes to trade. I mean, if you can, I wouldn't be opposed to it completely, but I'm just not really expecting it. But yeah, I think that would be like the only difference in terms of trading for somebody early would be a situation like that.
Yeah. Bryson funny, man. Patrick Williams. Listen, I get it. Listen, the Grizz down bad. So listen, you probably not the only person thinking that. There's a lot of people probably like Patrick Williams, Alex Caruso, anybody that's an NBA player, legit NBA player that's had some years.
Well, especially with all these injuries, you know what I mean? It's just like you really just need bodies out there at some point. Obviously you want like players that can also affect winning too, but it's like at some point when you keep looking at the injury report and there's all these guys, it's like you just need more quality players or guys that can at least go out there and give you real minutes that aren't on two-way contracts. So that's really the issue right now.
Yeah. Listen, the injury report, they use the notes page app on the iPhone for the injury report. That's how you know it's bad. When they got to do that, they going past the characters, man. You know it's bad. So yeah, I get it, I understand. But yeah, I mean, again, I don't think Zach is sitting here and doesn't see that they can't or they don't need to make a move. Like there something will happen, whether it's in the trade deadline or the offseason. Something's gonna happen. I mean, offseason is far away, but you get what I'm saying. Like something will happen. Just I don't know what. At least for the immediate, I don't know. I think they're just gonna bank on Ja being back and getting guys healthy. Like getting Luke healthy, getting getting Smart healthy. I think both of those guys really, those up, again, it sounds kind of hopeful because I think if Jenkins said basically, I think Luke is day to day and Smart needs more reevaluation, and I think Rose will be back soon. So that's good, but again, that can mean anything. Day to day could mean he could be back Sunday, or he could be back in 2 weeks. Like, well, who knows? So I think they'll bank on guys getting healthy again and just keep trying to improve. But yeah, I mean they will have to make a move at some point just because of how the numbers are. But we'll see how it goes. I know something will happen. I just don't know when. So I'm interested to see though.
Yeah, for sure. And like I always say, I appreciate everybody who's made it to the end of this episode of the Next Gen Podcast here on the Bluff City Podcast Network. Longer episode today, had a lot of good stuff to talk about. As always, I was joined by my co-host Alex Winton. I'm Bryson Wright, and we will see y'all on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Next Gen Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment wherever you download your podcasts. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co, where you will find comprehensive coverage of all things Memphis sports and how you can become an insider. We'll see you back here next time.